We know that whether you're a high school student or a 60-year-old grandmother or anywhere in between, it can seem like a daunting task to communicate and engage with middle schoolers. So, for the next few minutes, we are going to give you some tips and some insights on how to do just that. You could title this session, How to Talk to a Middle Schooler or Middle Schoolers. So, first up is for you to remember where they are. And you can do this by thinking about your own life experience, no matter how long ago it may have been or how hard it might be for you to remember. Think about when you were in middle school and think about what your friend groups looked like. Think about all the different changes and things that you were going through and experiencing. What was it like as a middle schooler trying to communicate for better or worse with your parents? And just putting yourself in their shoes and remembering your own experience can be so helpful when you're looking across the room at a middle schooler and just trying to think what is going on in your mind, what's happening in your world. That may be really helpful for you. Another part of this is remembering that middle schoolers are going through a ton of change. Their bodies are changing, their minds are kickstarting. There's all kinds of stuff in social media that's just nonstop with different technology and all of that. Just remember the amount of change they are experiencing, and that can help you communicate with them. And then the last part of this is just considering where just middle schoolers are today. Just kind of touched on it a little bit with social media. Think about all the things politically that are happening. And while you may think that all the things we see across our culture are not affecting students as much as, maybe adults, it is. It is having an impact. They're seeing things that maybe they're too young to really be seeing or quite understand. And so just consider all the change they're experiencing, not just in themselves, but also in our culture, how that's affecting them. That's going to be one big way to help you communicate with them.
Yeah, the next thing to think about is just breaking things down. So, in light of where middle schoolers are, break down what you're trying to say. This does not mean water it down or dumb it down. Middle schoolers are very smart. You just need to kind of separate what you're saying into smaller pieces. Also, try to choose concrete words over abstract words. Abstract thinking doesn't really develop as much until students enter high school. So, as much as you can communicate concretely, the better. Also, try to be prepared to define words and phrases, especially Christianese phrases or phrases or the things that we talk about a lot in church. So even defining words like grace or mercy that we use a lot, the students might not necessarily know the definition of those or even the difference between those two words. Lastly, be careful of trying to stack questions. Instead of asking 3 questions in a row, maybe ask one at a time and give students time to respond in between each question.
Yeah, so part 3 would be just to be engaging. Remember, if you can keep their interest, then you can keep their attention. So sometimes this may mean throwing a question out maybe it'll be kind of a silly question at first that you can turn into a more serious question. Sometimes it means maybe you just need to pass a ball around the room to get things going. It may mean that your group needs to get up and walk around the building for 5 minutes, or maybe you just need to spend the morning outside. Whatever it is, find ways to keep their attention, and that is surely going to help you be engaging. And then another part with this is to remember to speak their language. Remember that maybe some of the ways you speak may come off as KJV to them, and it might sound like Old English. So remember, you don't have to use all of the latest middle school slang or be able to know all the updated memes or anything like that. Do you even know what a meme is? That might be something you need to Google. But speak their language. Try to use words that they would understand. Use illustrations like Brentley was talking about that they would be able to understand and relate to. That's part of engaging with them, part of speaking their language.
Yeah, and in order to speak their language, part 4 of this would be to know your students. So pay attention to the things that your specific group of students are into, whether it's video games, or sports, or TV shows, music, or even memes. Spend time doing a quick Google search of the things that you find your students talking about the most, and just even expressing interest, showing a little bit of knowledge, or even using something that they love as an illustration on a small group morning would be huge for students, and just showing that you care about them and building relationships with them.
Yeah. If there's one word that we could give to leaders or to parents when it comes to the middle school phase, it is affirm. This is the biggest thing that they need, as all that is happening around them and in them is changing. Nothing seems to be stable. They need to be affirmed. They need to know that somebody is going to be there for them, cheering them on, affirming them. And hey, I know you feel like super different, and that may make you feel super weird, but God's made you this way. He's wired you this way for a reason. So they need to be affirmed in who they are and how they're created. They also need to be affirmed in who they are in Christ. And that, yes, you're a child of God. And so here's what that means. Remind them of the truths and the promises of God. Look for any in every way to affirm these middle schoolers.
Yeah, and before we end this video, we do want to offer you guys some encouragement. We often hear from middle school leaders that their small group is never on topic and how it can be like pulling teeth to try to get them to answer questions sometimes. But we definitely want to remind you that this is where you just remember where your students are and who they are as middle schoolers. Some of the most important things you can do are just being consistent and continuing to show up, being present, looking for ways to engage in their world, and working on building relationships. If you can come to the end of the year with just more relationships, creative bonds, and shared experiences, we consider that a win, just building group trust. All you can do is guide them. God alone can transform their hearts. You don't have to have all the questions. So for a middle schooler, just knowing that there's a person besides their parents that cares about them and thinks that they're awesome is huge. So leading a middle school small group always has its up and downs, for sure. But if you keep leaning in, we know that God is going to use you in major ways in their lives.
Mm-hmm.